I'm going to show how to put the damper rod inside the fork tube. This is the damper rod and this is the top of it, and there's a set of very small piston rings, actually 3 of them, and they act the same way as the piston rings in a cylinder do. They seal the top of the rod to the tube. The idea is so the fork oil won't go past these rings and then come out the top of the fork. The other end of the rod has a set of holes drilled in it, and this is what lets the fork oil move in and out of the rod through these holes as this is moving up and down inside the fork tube. So that creates a resistance and gives you some damping. The fork tube bottom has 2 holes in it which let the fork oil in and out, so they can get into the damper assembly. To install these little piston rings have to get past some screw threads here in the bottom of the fork, and they don't want to go. So I have this rather nice tool that I got from BMW, not very expensive, and I'll put the part number in my write-up, but it has some threads that fit the threads in the fork tube, and then a tapered body to compress the rings as you push the damper rod in. So it screws in the bottom like this until it's tight, and then make sure you've got the top of the damper rod going in first, since this is the bottom of the fork tube, and you just push and slide, wiggle a little bit, and they're inside the tube, so it's very handy, goes in very easily. Now the next thing that goes in is a bumper. It's a plastic disc that fits on the damper rod, protects it if the forks are extended all the way to the end. And I find it takes a little persuasion to get it to go in, but I use a little screwdriver, and then it's inside the fork. So we've got all that taken care of. Now the next part are these rings here and this center piece of a very large thick washer. They actually make a sandwich like this inside the fork tube. So the bottom one just screws in, remembering to put the flat face to the bottom. So it screws into those same little screw threads that I have in the damper rod that I talked about earlier. And you can actually push the fork all the way out of the way. It makes it a little bit easier to get this positioned in the tube, and it takes a little fiddling to get it to start. The threads are pretty fine, and it's a pretty good sized plug here, so I always have to fiddle with it, and then it starts to go. There we go. So I just use my finger in the middle to get it to go down all the way, and it'll stop when it gets to the bottom, so you can't screw it too far in. There we go. I often use my pliers. There's a little, so you can see it a little better on this one. So there's 2 little notches here. You can use needle nose pliers to get into those, just to help tighten and loosen. I often just use my pliers for snap rings. They'll fit right in there, and then I can use it just to snug it up. And the next piece is this ring that goes in as a sandwich, and then the top ring is just like the bottom ring. They're the same part, except this time you flip it over so that it's got the flat face facing you. And the same trick, you just run it in with your fingers until it's tight, and then I grab it just a little bit more with my snap ring pliers, which is a little bit harder this time because you've got that center ring in your way. And then the last piece that goes in is this snap ring, which keeps everything in place. So I just catch them on my snap ring pliers, and I set them so that as I squeeze the pliers, it will compress the snap ring. This is incredibly hard to do while you're holding the tube. And then you just get it on in here all the way. And then I like to take my screwdriver and make sure it's seated into the little cutout around the side. Which it's not quite, it's proud. So this is often what goes on as you get to fiddle with this a little bit. There it goes. That was a nice positive snap. And if I can, I'll try to prove that it's in the groove. I actually spin it a little, which I can do. So that's got the damper rod inside the fork tube ready for the rest of the assembly.